This event occurred over the course of several months. Being in the military, I had moved to Kansas the year prior and decided to change houses when my first rental home's lease ran out. We found a house that was slightly smaller than the one we had been in before, less yard, but in a quiet street. When I say quiet, I mean nearly deserted. Of the 9 houses on our street, 4 are occupied, all the rest belong to an elderly couple that use all but the building they live in to hoard things. You can see the clutter through the windows. I had a group of friends over one day. While we were hanging out in my kitchen, the only female in attendance got a vacant look on her face and locked on the building next door, which she could see outside the kitchen window. She very softly said that the building was making her uncomfortable and was frightened by it. Her comment caught my attention. Since moving in, I had never really been able to relax. I always felt like the windows were watching me. After this, I started to notice strange things my daughter started doing. My daughter, Freya, was 2 years old at the time but spoke well enough she could communicate ideas clearly if with limited words. She began running away from windows at all hours of the day, screaming and flinging herself at me. When asked what was wrong, she would explain that Papa scared her. Papa is the name she used for my father-in-law who lives with us. This would always happen when he was not in the room, but in another part of the house. The house is basically a tunnel with rooms off the left side of it, and I knew that there was no way he was scaring her from outside the kitchen, being that it opened up to a small grass area on the right side of the house. Most of the time it happened he was at work. What got to me the most is that it happened day or night, from windows or doorways, even the skylight. On several occasions while returning home, she would stare at the house next door while I removed her from her car seat. When asked what she was doing, she would tell me she was looking at him and point. There was nobody in the porch next door, and the front windows were boarded over. As I came and went from the house, I would see flashes of figures walking up and down our street, sometimes perched on branches in the trees. Always they were shadows, no features that I could tell, and would vanish if I tried to focus on them. In a handful of instances I would get hit with waves of dizziness walking through doorways outside, and on occasion inside my own home. The worst moment was a day I was in her room. She hated staying in her room at night. Even with a nightlight we would wake up to her sleeping on the couch huddled under a blanket. So while I was in her room changing her diaper, I felt a sense of unease but suppressed it so I could get her cleaned up and in some clothing to go to the store. I felt something, a slight breeze, brush against the back of my neck and expected it to be the curtain hanging behind me. Freya looked right past me, frowned, and said very clearly, "Papa, don't touch Daddy." It was shortly after this I renewed my practice of Wicca. I had pushed it far from my mind when I got out of high school, having a grudge against all religious beliefs thanks to a stepdad who let his faith in Christ drive him near mad. I don't think Papa was malicious, but we took the time to cleanse and safeguard my house. My daughter no longer sees, or tells me about, the things she sees. I write this on October 20th. Over the last week I have had the figures returning in my mind, not my sight, but my daughter has not shown any behavior changes and I think she is still safe. Thoughts?